Hey, and welcome back to Beginners Fab. My name is Eric McGrew, and I want to introduce the second portion, I guess you could say, of the series of videos for Beginners Fab that have to deal directly with my Daihatsu project, the 4-track Rugger Rocky F73, whatever you want to call it. As is the case with any custom fabrication or suspension setup, there's always a few factors that you just really can't live without. Plus, there's always a cost factor involved. Now, from my experience and what I've come to understand doing investigations or doing research online for the States, pricing in dollars and that kind of stuff, or doing pricing for here in Chile, it seems that building a custom leaf spring suspension is definitely cheaper than building a custom coil spring suspension. Now that's relative as well to who you know, where you work, what you do for a living, all that kind of stuff. But let's say for the basic person, a leaf spring suspension probably will be easier and cheaper for you to be able to build in your own home. Let's talk a little bit though about what it is that you have to build this leaf spring suspension. When doing a leaf spring suspension, no matter what kind of leaf springs you want to use, basically there are a few things that you'll have to have. Now, the thickness that you build the components out of, the amount of material needed, as well as the cost will kind of depend on what kind of vehicle you're building or what kind of use you want it to have and how you want the suspension to work. So, a few of the things that you'll have to have will definitely be you'll need spring retainer plates. You will need to make sure that you have some kind of shock mount, whether they be built onto the spring retainer plates or they are built directly to the axle and chassis. You'll need leaf spring packs themselves. And of course, you will need a pivot bracket. You will need a chassis shackle mount bracket. Those come in different forms and you can make them in a variety of ways. But you will have to have those things. Plus, you will definitely need the actual shackles themselves. Now, as I mentioned, these can change depending on the severity of use of the suspension and what it is that you have in mind for your vehicle or what kind of vehicle you're dealing with. So let's talk a little bit about the difficulty of applying one of these kind of custom leaf spring suspensions to some rig that you have planned for as a project. Honestly, I would say that it's a moderate job. The factors that are going to be most limiting for people are making sure that they have some kind of basic fabrication knowledge. A lot of the work that I'm having to do, you could actually cut out of the job completely if you live in places like Europe or the States where they have stores that are selling prefabbed fabrication components such as bracket mounts, any kind of tabs that you can bolt through that have 5/8 or whatever the bolt size that you need is, as well as, you can eliminate a lot if you buy some of the pre-made packets that I know some of the companies sell, like for the Samurais, I know there's a couple of packets already out there for leaf spring conversion kits and that kind of stuff. However, if you're having to do it all from scratch, what you will have to make are definitely a few tabs. You're going to have to make a few mounting perches and a few spring retainer plates. And you're going to have to figure out what kind of shock suspension mounting you're going to have, depending on how or where your shocks are mounted from the factory location. Now, some things that you're not going to be getting away from if you plan on doing this yourself are the need to do some quality welding. Once again, if you want to know my opinions on welding and things, check out Off-Road Independence podcast. I talk about that with a number of people. But you'll notice that my welds and most of my stuff are done with stick welding and they're not perfect. So the lines or the cords don't have to be perfectly stacked dimes, which if you can do that, that's great. But they do need to be quality welds. They need to be controllable welds that are welding appropriately to thicker and thinner materials. The reason I mention this is because most of my shackles, most of my bracketing is made of either 1/4 or 3/8 plate. And I've been told that minimal you should want to use 3/16. And you're welding to chassis and things that typically are only around an 1/8 inch thick. So there is a variance in materials of thicknesses that you're actually trying to weld together. If you don't know how to weld appropriately, you can blow holes all in your chassis and effectively debilitate seriously the strength of the chassis in that area. Plus, there's no guarantee that your suspension is going to actually stay stuck to the chassis itself, and you may end up losing the rear axle on the way down the road. By the way, that's not a good thing. So you need to kind of keep that in mind as well. Now, another thing is that you need to make sure that when you're going through this process, you actually take the time to actually put this stuff together in an orderly fashion. For instance, one of the big errors I made, and I admit this error on my other suspension that I had on this truck, is that I had forgotten to actually change out the bolts to the right size bolt holes and bolts on the tabs. And so what was happening was I had play inside my bushings, and those bushings allowed a large amount of movement, which was around 4 millimeters of movement inside the play of the suspension, and it eventually tore off one of my brackets. So in other words, make sure you pay attention that the pass-through holes on your bushings meet the same size diameter hole that you're using for a bolt and for your tabs. You have to do that. So you need some kind of drill or something that you can perforate fairly large holes. 14 millimeters and above is typically what you're going to need. And you need to have access to some kind of high quality, probably grade 8 bolt system or hardware that you're going to use on the truck. You'll also need to make sure that you can get your hands on some U-bolts, whether they be the square U-bolts or the actual round U-bolts, for mounting the suspension to the axle, whether it be your front or rear suspension. If you're going to get into a solid axle swap or a SAS for the front, and you want to use leaf springs on it, you'll have to also make some adjustments and make sure that your steering system doesn't meet in contact with the leaf springs, which could include a little bit of modifying and that kind of stuff that I'm not going to go over in any of these videos. So you'll need to do some research on that as well. But no matter what you do, you need to make sure that you do it the best quality that you can. And if you're very unsure about it, don't do it at all. Have somebody who knows that they can do it and is willing to take that risk. I myself have been welding for a while now, and I trust what I'm doing, and I'm completely satisfied with the work that I'm putting on this truck. From here on though, we're actually going to get into a little bit of the process that it took me to get the leaf spring suspension to the point it is now. And so I really hope you guys come back to see the rest of my videos. I'm really happy that you stopped by, so please don't forget to keep on visiting beginnersfab.com. You can also check out all my YouTube videos through this same video on below, or the channel in which this is placed. I also have playlists that you can check out. And please don't forget to check out my offroadindependence.com site, where I have all of my off-road podcasts that I do with different individuals who like off-roading, some of them more famous, some of them less famous. But the content is always interesting because we're getting real-life perspectives of off-roading. Also, if you want to see some of my adventures and different things that I have going on, you can definitely check me out at ericmcgrew.tv, where you will find all of this content. And you can look me up on Facebook as well with Eric McGrew, or facebook.com/groups/beginnersfab. Or you can just look under this video in the information on YouTube, and there you can find more links to get to all of my sites that you might want to see. So once again, thanks for stopping by, and I hope to see you in the next video.